How's it going, everybody? This is Jay, coming out with you with a bit of an impromptu video, one I wasn't exactly planning on making. We're not talking about a comic book specifically, rather we're talking about a comic book movie this time. Yes, we're talking about the, as of this recording, 3-day-old new The Batman as of this year. And yes, I know movie reviews are supposed to be Phil's thing, but if Phil could put out a video more than once in a leap year, I'd feel bad about doing it. Now, I wasn't really planning on talking about this one. Hell, I wasn't even really planning on seeing it. I have been put on record before of not being the biggest Batman fan. I find him boring, and I think just every possible conceivable take has been done to death, and every interesting take has really only been tried once or twice. So I wasn't really planning on necessarily seeing this movie, but I decided just kind of a spur of the moment kind of thing. Decide, you know what? I'm gonna go see it just to see if it's good because I've been hearing it's been really good, and you know what? Yeah, it was actually really good. I was kind of honestly surprised. So I'm not gonna go too much into spoilers, at least for the majority of it. So I might talk about spoilers specifically near the end, but I'm just going to start off with, of course, Robert Pattinson as Batman. I think he was really, really good as Batman in this movie. He has a very good presence about him. He's got that quiet, very brooding nature to him, both in and out of suit. And just the way he delivers his lines, the way he carries himself, and his actions and his not necessarily presence, but his overall physical appearance, the way he presents himself, is he really nails that schizo loner vibe that I like about. That's kind of like how I like Batman, and I like that he's kind of unsure about himself. This is relatively early in the Batman's career. I think they said about 2 years into this, and he's still kind of unsure of himself. He's going through a bit of a crisis of faith in this movie where he's been doing this for a not insignificant amount of time, and he's become an established part of Gotham. People know him, and he's like they already have the bat signal. He's a considered figure of Gotham, but he's still early enough in his career where he's basically isn't having any effect, and he's doing the whole grim, dark, I am vengeance kind of shit, and it's worked on like the petty, useless thugs. And there's this great montage early on where they throw up the bat signal, and we cut to like different criminals doing crimes, and they just look into like deep pitch black shadows, and they start to freak the fuck out because they think Batman's there, and of course most of the time he's not there. And I like that kind of. He's already set himself up as this big myth. Like people know he's real, but he's still this mythological figure basically. But he's basically having no effect, and that's kind of like a crisis he goes throughout this movie. Is just trying to figure out like, well, shit, something's not working. Where do I go from here? And one of the things I like the best about this movie is that it's not really a general superhero movie. It's a crime thriller basically. It's a mystery crime thriller that just happens to star a guy in a fucking bat costume. And I like that. I really like that angle as well. That it's not I wouldn't necessarily it's not traditional, but it's an atypical take for a comic book movie, and that's kind of I like that kind of detective angle. I like it when Batman is being a fucking detective and trying to solve a mystery. That's the angle of Batman I like. I don't like super ultra mimetic god of prep time, whatever bullshit. I don't like Bat God, basically. I kind of hate Bat God, but that's what they keep doing these days. And this movie is very definitely not Bat God. He's definitely still Batman. Because, he's not perfect. He's still got problems. He's still working it out. Like, he gets his ass thrashed constantly in this movie. Like, he does pretty well in fight scenes, and I really enjoy all of his fight scenes. I don't know if it was a stunt double or Pattinson himself, but the fights are really good. It's not too flashy. It's a lot of just Batman using heavy blows and a lot of very brutal holds, and just kind of very. He goes he's not really like going for flashy stuff. He's just going to put people down and put them down as fast as he can. It's very reminiscent of the combat in the Arkham games, the way it all flows together. It's a little less cheesy than the Arkham game combat, but it's very similar. One of the things I'm kind of disappointed that they dropped is that they open up with him doing this like this war journal kind of thing where he's detailing his thoughts and this is kind of personal narration there, and I liked that vibe they were giving of him just kind of like dictating his own thoughts to himself, but they dropped that immediately after the intro, and other than during the epilogue, they don't use it again. And I was kind of disappointed because I liked that angle they were going with. But overall, Pattinson was a really good Batman and Bruce. They do kind of do that distinction of Bruce Wayne is the mask, Batman is the real one, and they kind of bring that up once or twice. But other than that, like a thematic thing, it's not entirely relevant. But I did like how a heavy majority of the movie, Pattinson's face is covered up. Not necessarily him in the suit. He does spend a significant portion of the movie in the suit fully masked, but even when he's out of the suit, his face is obscured in some way. Like he's wearing a face mask because he's trying to be incognito, or he's got like, because they do the black eyeliner thing, kind of like how the Nolan movies did it. But I think it looks a little bit better here because the eyes of the suit are molded a little bit larger. So not only does it look a little better, it still looks that kind of homemade, not like super military vibe. But I think it works a little better here too with the lighting because it makes the white of the irises pop out against the pitch black, and it kind of resembles the bright white little eye lines that Batman usually is drawn with. I know some people kind of would just prefer it just to be like white lenses over the suit, and they did have a couple of test suits with those, and it looked okay, but I think this looks a little bit better. It fits the vibe of the movie better. But yeah, like you'll have scenes where Pattinson has the mask off, but he still has all the makeup, and it's covering most of his face because it's all, he's gotten all sweaty and beat up, and it's starting to smear everywhere. Or just like minor stuff like the angling of the camera will have his face obscured, or like he'll have his hair parted over his face where you can't see part of it. And I really liked that. I really liked that they, one, that they had him in the suit for a majority of the movie, but two, that they kind of played with that angle of the masking in the faces. I really enjoyed that. His relationship with Alfred doesn't really go anywhere. Alfred's barely in the movie, but I kind of like the way they do it, where Alfred's a little bit more direct. He's a little bit more angry at Bruce. He's a little more forceful as like a parent, a surrogate parent, basically. But he's still super gung ho with helping out Bruce. Andy Serkis as Alfred was a very strange casting choice, but one I think really worked well. He doesn't have a whole lot of screen time. He's in only a small handful of scenes, but the scenes that he are in, he's really good. I liked him. On the other spectrum, in more ways than one, is the main villain, the Riddler, who is just terrible in this movie. Just both in concept and in performance. I don't know why the fuck they made him the Riddler. There's very little to do with the actual Riddler in the comics. For all it matters, everybody in this movie but Batman might as well just be a complete original character, because they don't really resemble the comic book counterparts very much. So the Riddler in this movie he's a Zodiac killer-esque serial killer madman, basically. He's like a domestic terrorist serial killer, and he's been targeting, the whole plot of the movie is that he's targeting, influential figures in Gotham. The movie opens up with him murdering the mayor, and it kind of goes from there. And his whole thing is that he's trying to expose some big conspiracy about Gotham that's going to, it would destroy the city. And of course he's fucking with Batman, and he's trying to clue in Batman to what's going on to push him into investigating it as well. And that's where the whole crime thriller angle comes from, is figuring out what the fuck the Riddler's game is. But I really don't like him in this movie. The Riddler was kind of one of the big reasons why I didn't want to see this movie. It's because when they announced it and when they showed that first trailer, it was like, oh, we got this cool mystery villain, and I was like, oh, he's like a serial killer, and he's doing like a Zodiac killer kind of shit. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I wonder who they're doing. Maybe they're doing like a Calendar Man, or they're doing like a Long Halloween kind of thing, or maybe they're going with Zaz, or I don't know, maybe they'll go like throw a fucking curveball, do Professor Pig or something, and then they do kind of like a big press junket kind of thing. It's like, and watch as the Batman goes up against the Riddler, and I was like, ah, fuck, because like, you can't make the Riddler edgy. It doesn't work. It is impossible. His character is completely antithetical to grim and edge. It doesn't work at all. And here's the thing. The take in this movie is a very fairly good villain. He's just a terrible Riddler. The Riddler should not be a fucking edgy Zodiac killer, jigsaw, death trap madman, because that's not really the Riddler. I mean, sure, he's done like weird death trap stuff before, but not in the sense of like, it's like he's not trying to be like, again, he's like fucking Jigsaw from the Saw movies where he puts people into death traps to teach them a lesson or some shit, and it's kind of weird. Like they're not even really riddles. Basically, they're not. There's no. I don't know. It's hard to explain it without just talking about spoilers. But here's the thing. Conceptually, I like the idea. I'm not a big fan of him being the Riddler, but I'm fine with the idea of the villain. But God, Paul Dano is just terrible in this movie. He is just awful. Which is a shame too, because in some of the scenes of the movie when he's just kind of standing there, he has this very good presence of like a very calculated sociopath madman serial killer type. Like there'll be scenes where like there's nothing happening and he's just there in the background and he's fucking creepy as hell. But then he opens his mouth and he's a total fucking spurg in this movie. Everybody's gonna get mad at you. Yeah, fuck you, whatever. I don't care. It's not even like in the fun way Riddler usually is, where he's obsessive compulsive about random riddles and shit. He's just like a shrieking man-child in this movie. Every time he opens his mouth, he just completely destroys any suspense he had as a villain. And I think this is largely, again, a performance thing, because with a different actor or a different performance, he would have been really good. I would have really liked him, but he's just awful in this movie. It's like every time he's opening his mouth, he's like shrieking at the top of his fucking lungs, and he's just rambling about fucking nothing. I swear to God, half the times in this movie when he's talking, I was expecting him to start going on a tangent about boyfriend-free girls or something. It's just ridiculous. He does not... It's like Jim Carrey's Riddler, but at least Jim Carrey had that energy to him. Paul Dano does not have that energy Jim Carrey had. He's basically copying that performance, but not putting in the energy that made Jim Carrey entertaining as the Riddler. And I think that really just kind of just kills a lot of his scenes in this movie. Because I like that kind of conspiracy, serial killer vibe they're going with, where he's trying to expose this, grand cover-up. And I kind of like that angle, but his performance just ruins it. And another thing is I fucking hate the costume is awful. It's terrible. I'm sure you've seen the pictures of it, and he's bad. Like, I get, like, from a narrative standpoint, I understand the costume and it works, because, it's like a bunch of random off-the-shelf shit. Like, he's got, like, a generic combat mask, and he's got his fucking head wrapped in saran wrap, and he's just got a generic, like, army jacket. It's all random stuff you could just buy at, like a army surplus store, or, like, a Goodwill or whatever. And I get that angle there, where he could be anybody, he doesn't have a special costume. It's like in Scream, where they just bought a generic Halloween costume, so anybody could be the killer. But, like, that doesn't work for the Riddler. And again, it's like, it's all bland olive green, like, at least make it a little more saturated, give him a little bit of purple, give him the fucking tie, for all if he had the fucking tie, that would be enough. But no, they couldn't even go that far. Like, other than the little fucking question mark sigil he has stitched into one of the pockets, there's nothing identifying him as the Riddler at all, and it's not a good costume. And I honestly do think he's the weakest part of the movie, which is a shame, because with any other performance, or with some minor tweaks, he could be really good. I think this would be a very interesting take for the character. Not one I'm personally fond of. Again, I prefer a goofier Riddler. You can't really make him serious, but it might have worked. I do just think they should have either gone with a different villain, or just made an original villain entirely. Because, I mean, nobody's going to be mad if it's not, like, a big-name villain. Like, It's fucking Batman. The movie's gonna say it could be about him doing his taxes, and this movie would still sell $1 billion. You could have made it anybody, but the Riddler feels really out of place. But yeah, the plot of the movie is a more of a psychological crime thriller mystery where Batman's trying to hunt down the Riddler, and he's getting fed breadcrumb of clues, and he's going he's doing the detective shit. And that's what I like about this movie is that it's detective Batman. It's not super duper Bat God fighting aliens or the Joker doing must society a billion times or whatever. It is world's greatest detective, quote unquote, because he kind of sucks at it in this movie, but he's still new at it, so that's fine. He's not a genius or anything, and I like that because that leads to some nice tension where, again, because he's not like a fucking super genius, he makes mistakes and he fucks up and he obvious things that he misses obvious details until later in the movie, and that's a good narrative flow. Like it's a great detective noir kind of thing because it's not like, again, it's not the fucking super bat god who has access to the script so he knows everything that's going on. You're learning stuff as he does, and that's another thing I like too is that at no real point do we ever really permanently leave his viewpoint. So every single time we learn information, it's all fresh to us because every time Batman is learning information, we the audience are learning it as along with it. Very rarely does the movie break from his viewpoint, or is there a scene where he is not involved in some way. And I really liked that too. The mystery itself is, well, without going into spoilers, it's a fairly standard grand conspiracy cover-up with the rich elite covering up a mysterious, shady crime that can, it's got the whole city kind of wrapped up in it, and a central figure in it is, and one of the weirder casting choices, and one that actually surprised me a lot, was the kind of central figure of it, as we start to find out as the movie goes on, is Carmine Falcone, the infamous mob boss, and he's played by John Turturro, who not only did I not know was in this movie, but was surprisingly really good as Falcone. I don't know what kind of accent he was trying to do. It sounded like he was trying to do an Italian accent. I don't know how an Italian man can do such a shitty Italian accent, but I was impressed. But it was really good. I really liked his role in the movie. He's got that very kind of what's the word? He's friendly evil, I guess is a good way to put it, where he's a very nice person, kind of outwardly nice, and he's very jolly, and he gets along well with everybody, even when Batman's fucking with him, or Bruce is trying to confront him, and he's got that very calm and friendly demeanor to him, and obviously he's a fucking mob boss psycho, and I really liked that. He's strangling somebody, there's a he could be killing somebody basically, and he's still being nice about it, nice and cheery, and I really liked that performance. But on the topic of Falcone, we have, of course, his right hand goon, the Penguin, who honestly he steals the show. Colin Farrell was having so much fun in this movie. He was so good. Every scene he's in, he completely mogs everybody in the scene. He just steals the attention. He's great. I really loved the Penguin in this movie. I was kind of disappointed that he wasn't in it as much. But he was really good. He was really good. He's almost unrecognizable as Colin Farrell, both in terms of performance and appearance. And a lot of that is very heavy practical makeup. And the makeup looks really good. They don't really go too far with exaggerating him. He's got the hooked nose that kind of looks like a beak, and he's got a very scarred demeanor, and he looks good. He looks really good as the Penguin. It's a nice take. But he's not in it a whole lot, which is kind of disappointing. And of course there's some angles of a conspiracy element too, obviously, because it's got the elites of the city kind of involved, and everybody's got their fingers in different pies, and it's all kind of woven together in a big intricate web. And I like that angle too, and that leads to a nice dynamic Batman has with Commissioner. Well, he's not Commissioner in this movie yet. I think he kind of becomes it at the end. They never really say it. But Gordon. And I really enjoyed Jeffrey Wright as Gordon. I know when they first revealed the casting, a lot of people got really kind of mad because, of course, Gordon's a white guy in the comics, and they cast a black man as him. And in some circumstances, I'm usually on that boat, if only because it feels lazy. Because you could, rather than try to make a unique, interesting character who happens to be so and so race or whatever, you take a pre existing character and change them to fit that. Because rather than try to make your own character and make them work, you're just going to take something that's already established and fit it to fit your image. And generally, I don't like when they do that, if only because, again, it's lazy. You could make your own interesting character. There are plenty of interesting characters of all sorts of varieties, but no, you're just going to take a pre-existing concept and cram it into a new viewpoint. And if there's a good narrative element to do so, I think I'm usually fine with it. But majority of the time, they just do it for the sake of it, and it feels lazy, and it doesn't feel like anybody really involved cared. But Gordon's a good example of it done right, because if only because it doesn't fucking matter, but also because Gordon is really good in this movie. One of the things I liked about Gordon is that he's actually involved in the plot. Very, very rarely, and pretty much all Batman adaptations, with the exception of like BTAS, I think, Gordon is either just kind of there as a background element, or he's just exists solely for exposition. Like, he'll show up to dump convenient information for Batman, and then he'll just kind of fucking be dicking around for most of the movie until there's new exposition. But no, Gordon is actually very heavily involved in the movie. He has almost as much screen time as Batman does, to be entirely honest. They're doing like a buddy cop dynamic thing, like again, Gordon's still kind of new there, so he's really kind of sticking his neck out for Batman, getting him involved, because he doesn't have that pull where he can just let Batman do whatever. He's still kind of like lower in the rungs, where he has to put his own name on the line to let Batman do his thing. And I like that, because it's that established Batman, but he's not like the super duper ultra bat god where he can do fucking whatever. And I do like the buddy cop dynamic they have, where, of course, Gordon is, an actual cop, so he's doing the actual cop stuff, and Batman is, of course, it's kind of like a Sherlock Watson kind of thing, where he's kind of the Watson, but again, he's more of like a traditional cop. Obviously, he follows the rules, but he's willing to step aside and break protocol to help Batman. And I like their dynamic of, to quote Penguin, good cop, batshit cop. It's good. I really liked Gordon in this movie. His delivery was a little weird. He's kind of doing like this gravelly, like, "Oh, Batman, we gotta stop the Riddler before he something whatever" kind of voice, and it feels a little weird. I'm not sure if that's just his normal speaking voice, to be entirely honest, but it felt a little weird. But overall, he had a very good physical presence. He had a very good delivery. Just overall, he was really good. I think he's one of my favorite Gordons so far, pretty much. And then of course we have Catwoman, the other major character in this movie, who she's okay. She's fine. She doesn't really need to be here. She's kind of superfluous to a lot of the plot. So Catwoman in this movie is... she's not even really Catwoman. She's basically just an original character who happens to be named Selina Kyle. So her whole role in the movie is that when she's introduced, she's a friend of some random whore who just kind of inconveniently got involved in the big mystery because she got caught, fucking the mayor. And of course the mayor, he's, one of those big, traditional life, family values guys. And of course he's going out and buying a whore. So she only really gets involved because her friend happened to be that whore. And she's trying to investigate, she goes missing. So she's trying to investigate what happened. And other than like one scene really early on where she's robbing the mayor's house, if only to find something related to her friend, there's really nothing that makes her Catwoman. She could have been she could have been an original character or anybody but Catwoman, and she would have been perfectly fine. Zoe Kravitz is okay. I don't necessarily really care for her as an actress. She's fine with what she's given, but again, Catwoman is kind of superfluous in this movie because she's just kind of there. her being Catwoman is honestly just an excuse to have her involved in fight scenes, and she's fine in fight scenes. But it could have, again, it could have been like Huntress or whatever, and the role in the movie would have been exactly the same. So it's really only Catwoman because, obviously they need to have the fucking love interest or whatever. But I mean, again, she's not terrible, but again, she just feels superfluous. She's, other than one big thing, which is admittedly a spoiler, so I won't talk about it at the moment. She doesn't have any general connection to the overarching plot or the mystery or anything like that, beyond the aforementioned trying to find my friend, who's also tangentially involved anyways. So her involvement in the plot and her continued involvement to getting involved just kind of feels weak. She's just, again, I'm not a big fan of her in this movie. I think it shouldn't have been Catwoman. It should have been an original character or somebody else. So before I start talking about specific spoiler elements and stuff I liked, I think the cinematography of this movie was really good. There's a lot of very dynamic cuts, very fluid camera motion. They don't do a whole lot of like that. Every kind of fight scene, all the fight scenes and all of the action scenes, they don't do that fucking, super whipping around, you can't see shit camera that you see in every other comic book movie. Every kind of fight scene has a very flat, fixed camera. There are a lot of good dynamic angles, but it's not like whipping around. It's very comic book-esque, where you have a fixed angle and you have very quick cuts of action within those panels. It's like you're seeing a bunch of snapshots from a comic kind of put into motion and filling in the blanks. Every shot feels interesting. It feels dynamic. Even general flat shots when nothing is really happening are still made really interesting because of the use of the camera and the angles and the lighting and all of the elements combined. It also leads to a lot of very suspenseful moments where there are big flat shots and you'll have something kind of happening in the background. Like they do the shot of, Batman emerging from pitch black shadows, and he's got very slow, methodic movements. It's just, you hear the thudding of his boots as he slowly walks through the shadows and into frame. And every time they did it was fucking great. They do it, I think, 2 or 3 times. They do it once at the beginning of the movie when he first appears. Another time, there's a scene in I think it was a church, where he walks into the shadows. There's like a hostage thing going on, one of the Riddler's targets. And I think he does it a 3rd time between those two, but I can't remember. I think they should have done it at least one more time right there at the end. Well, again, that's more of a spoiler thing. But there's a good point where they're showing off with one of the secondary villains, and I won't say who because it's a spoiler element, where they should have done that kind of slow, methodic walking through the shadows, because the scene is set up for them to do so. But then they subvert it by just having Batman appear from off frame, which I guess is a good subversion, but is also like you had one more chance to use this, and every single time before it was great, and you didn't take it. And speaking of, the lighting in this movie is really good. It's a very dark, subdued color palette, almost borderline monochromatic at points. There's very little color. Like, there's a lot of heavy use of red, obviously red, and warmer tones like orange. Obviously, if you've seen the advertisements, it's all red and black, nothing else. And that works. It really works well. They don't overdo the red, but I think it's predominantly like very kind of, I wouldn't say muddy. It's very neutral, flat, warm tones. And again, it almost feels monochromatic at points too. And it's really good. And it's not like, it's dark and again, it's not muddy, but it's dark and unsaturated, but it's not like impossible to see. Like, everything is still very well lit. Everything is very well framed with the lighting and the, either the backgrounds or the foreframe. But even when it's dark, you can still see stuff perfectly. Everything is really lit in a very methodical way, and you can everything is highlighted even when it's like pitch black. And that's really good. I really like that. It looks really good. And the music in this movie is also particularly good. It's predominantly an orchestral score. A lot of it's really good. Obviously, I'm not a music guy. I've said so before. So I don't really know how to say it. It carries a lot of energy, and they of course can keep quiet moments. They have a little bit of incidental stuff in the background, and it manages to set scenes well. The two primary songs, well, three, I guess. The primary songs they use are Batman has this let motif that's used pretty consistently throughout. And it's like dun, 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 kind of like that. And it's used really effectively. Like, they'll splice it into scenes when Batman's doing something badass. Like, there's a fight scene early on where he's in the iceberg lounge trying to talk to Penguin, and he fucking uses his grappling hook to throw dudes from across the room. And every time he throws the grappling hook, they kind of splice that in. And it's really good. It's really catchy, and I like when they start amping it up when stuff starts getting more suspenseful. And the other song they use is Ave Maria, which is predominantly used with the Riddler. That's kind of his theme in this movie. And I think the song is effectively utilized. I know it's kind of cliche to use Ave Maria, but I think it works well for this movie and for the uses they have it in. It helps also that they don't play it super consistently. I think they only play it like in full twice. I think there's like a snippet here or two there, but they don't play it super often, so it feels like it's well used. And I also like kind of that ties in with Batman's theme and his connection with the Riddler they have in the movie, where Batman's let motif is, of course, is a corrupted version of Ave Maria, which, I will be fully honest, took me an embarrassing amount of time watching the movie to figure that out. But I think that's a good use of the score there. And the sole unoriginal licensed song that they use is Something in the Way by Nirvana, which is pretty effectively used. They use it once in the prologue and once in the epilogue, both during Batman's narrations of events. And it works as a very good book ending of the movie, where it's setting Batman's general thought process and mood for the movie in the opening, where, of course, you get this very moody, melancholic song. Batman's kind of feeling, it fits with Batman's kind of general vibe in the movie, where he's not sure, he's going through a crisis of faith, like I said, and the use of the song and the lyrics really fit with that, where he's just he's unsure of himself. But at the end of the movie, once he's gone through the trials and tribulations of the movie, it comes back during his outro epilogue, and I think it works really good there well too, because even though the lyrics are the same, obviously, the meaning kind of changes as he's kind of grown as a character. And again, without spoiling the ending specifically and what happens, it serves as a good way to cap off Batman's character arc in the movie. So I think that's everything I would want to say before going into specific spoilers. So from here on out, it's going to be spoilers until I end it. So the big conspiracy that the Riddler was trying to uncover was, there's this running theme of the Gotham Renewal Project, which is, of course, a running theme in Batman media is that Gotham is a total shithole that never improves. Thomas Wayne had set up this big billion-dollar hedge fund, basically, to help, improve things for the city. And, of course, he dies like a week later, as we all know. And I don't think I mentioned that the movie doesn't do the origin story thing. The movie starts with Batman already established, and at no point do they ever flash back to the Waynes dying or really bring up the Waynes dying, other than the fact that their deaths are involved in the plot, which I really liked. I'm glad that they didn't assume that the audience is stupid and doesn't know who Batman is. But obviously the Waynes got killed, and now there's this billion-dollar hedge fund, basically, with no oversight and nobody's attached to it. So all of the elites of the city, they kind of all pull together and they start taking the money to use, just use in general. And the Riddler's whole thing is that he was an orphan at some random orphanage that the Waynes were planning on funding there. And his death obviously fucked over his life, and with the elites, and they kind of ruined things from there. So his whole thing is that he's trying to get revenge on the elites of the city who fucked over his life. But predominantly he wants revenge on Bruce specifically because, a week later, poor old Bruce Wayne is an orphan now, even though he's a billionaire in this fucking mansion tower. Which is, I think, is another weird thing. Rather than having a specific, separate mansion, Batman's Wayne Manor and, the Wayne Enterprises building are one and the same, which is a really neat idea. Of course, he wants revenge because, the news cycle all focused on Bruce immediately after the murder. So shit happening to the the little orphans and the hedge fund going mysteriously missing is it's whatever. Nobody cared about that. So that's kind of his whole tangent, is that he wants revenge on Bruce and he wants revenge on the elites of the city for basically ruining his life and furthering the corruption and destruction of the city. And as a plot, that's really interesting. But again, I don't know why this has to be the Riddler. This could have been fucking anybody. And of course, at the center of things is Falcone and the Waynes and their murders, kind of all tied in together there. And I do like that they don't have the Waynes entirely involved. They start to throw that in as a little bit of a wrench during the second act, where of course the Riddler exposes a big oh, Thomas Wayne was lying about so and so. He was kind of this big mysterious cover up he was trying to do about stuff involving Martha, who. Weird change is that I don't know if this is me misinterpreting it, but she's related to the Arkhams for some particular reason in this continuity, which is, it's all right. I mean, it feels like a weird choice, but I think it's introduced in the plot well, assuming I'm understanding what was happening correctly, of course. But of course Wayne is involved because he was trying to cover up some reporter who wanted to expose some mystery about Martha Wayne, and I think it was like she was like a fucking crazy person who was in and out of Arkham consistently throughout the years. So of course he was trying to cover up the report of it, and then because he's buddy with Falcone, like he had been once or twice before in continuity. Falcone ended up killing the reporter. And there's a good bend to the elements there, where Batman's kind of worldview of his family gets destroyed because of that, and then it turns out that Falcone was manipulating and lying to him, and that his dad didn't want anybody killed, and that's why the Waynes are dead, is because he was going to snitch on Falcone, so Falcone got him killed. And I kind of like that element too, where the bit of a twist on the Wayne murders. It's a little bit of a throwback to pre-Crisis with the origin of the Waynes and their deaths and their connection, but obviously it wasn't Falcone. I think it's also another story had it, but I can't remember off the top of my head which one. But I liked that. I did like that nice twist on the narrative there. And I kind of like how by the end, Carmine Falcone has basically become the real main villain of the movie, because he's been fucking orchestrating everything for like a decade or so. I think they say like 20 years or something. Because of course he's it turns the whole thing is that Riddler is trying to lead Batman into finding a rat who's been kind of letting this information leak and letting everything kind of build up to the conspiracy. And of course it turns out that it was all Falcone, because he was doing everything the whole time, which feels a little hokey after the fourth time it turns out that he was behind everything. But I like that idea of like, oh yeah, of course the most powerful mobster in the city would know about all this shit. Like, my rival got taken down because I let in on I leaked information to the cops, so I could take over his operation, and you get a lot of stuff like that. I liked that. Again, it gave John Turturro a lot to do in this movie. And of course the Riddler's whole plan was to get Batman to expose Falcone as the true culprit behind everything, so he could fucking kill him. And which was honestly surprising, is that Falcone he fucking gets shot and he's just gone after the second act of the movie. He's just dead. Like there's no like justice for him. There's no like his plotline just drops dead immediately right there, literally, in fact, which was pretty surprising actually. And this is one where the movie starts to lose me a little bit in the third act, because after this point, Catwoman has no role in the movie because Falcone's dead. The mystery of her friend is solved, and of course, like I alluded to, the big whole mystery with her and what ties her into the plot is that she's Falcone's daughter in this movie, which actually genuinely surprised me, because I had heard a couple of leaks here and there about the movie, but I did not know that was going to happen. That genuinely shocked me. But also as part of why it should have not been Catwoman, because at this point she's basically unrecognizable as Catwoman. But I thought it was a good twist. It was a good way to tie her into the plot and keep her relevant. But again, because Falcone just dies, she doesn't really have anything left to do in the third act, and she doesn't really have any motive to stick around or help stop the Riddler. But yeah, the Riddler gets caught. You know, he's gone. You know, the Riddler's caught, and his plan is basically over in Act 3. This is where we get the big reveal scene with him and Batman in Arkham, and I kind of like how they're playing with the neither of them really have a full picture of things. Like Riddler keeps taunting and screaming Bruce Wayne's name, and Batman thinks he's intimidating him, and he thinks he knows that who he is because earlier in the movie, Bruce got sent a package that was a fucking bomb. Riddler was trying to kill him, obviously, like I had mentioned, because he's kind of involved and he kind of blames him for what happened. But as it turns out, no, Riddler does not know that he's Batman, and he's been kind of on a false assumption from here on. But at the same time, like, Batman missed some clues, and he's not fully clued in on what Riddler's plan is, and I think there's a good dynamic there where Batman's not the genius he thinks he is, and Riddler's definitely not the genius he thinks he is. But again, that whole scene with them in the Arkham there is just kind of like it kills the Riddler for me because he's just running around the room and screaming and like having a tantrum basically, and it's just ridiculous, and it does not work for what they've been setting up for the character. It should have been a very more subdued and more calculated kind of performance. Like, not even necessarily like I don't want to say like Hannibal Lecter-esque, but it should have been more that kind of cold, calculated psycho for the way they had set up the Riddler. So of course the real final step of the Riddler's plan was that the conspiracy, of course, was so deep that he wanted to, you know, basically destroy the city and start it over. So his whole plan was to blow the seawalls of the city, to flood the city, and then this is where it gets a little ridiculous because the Riddler was expecting everybody to kind of filter into the main Gotham, I think they call it the Garden or whatever, the big sports stadium where they were holding the new mayor election. And his plan was to have everybody kind of flood in there, both figuratively and literally. And he had an army of Riddlers who were just going to start opening fire on people just to kill as many people as they could, I guess, which is fucking stupid and is really just kind of ridiculous. It's mostly just an excuse for a big climactic fight scene, and I wasn't a big fan of it. I mean, conceptually, I kind of get the idea, but if like having him directly involved, it should have just been a bunch of like random weirdos who were obsessed with him and, you know, took the wrong lessons from him or whatever. But having him directly tied in with the whole militia thing it's a little much. I don't know. But I did like the big ending set piece, and you know, you've got the city flooding, so Batman's kind of rushing along, and everybody's kind of literally flooding into the stadium there, and you've got all this destruction going on. It's very shocking, and it's really well shot. It feels pretty real. I mean, obviously it's all CG, and there's some practical effects too, mostly in the ending with the destroyed stadium, and it looks really good. But I did think the ending fight scene with the Riddlers was pretty good. There's a lot of. This is where it starts to get a little bit more shaky cam-y-esque, but that's just because of the nature of it, where they're up in the rafters of the arena, and you've got Batman kind of flipping around and zipping around and, you know, grappling around. And I like that, though. It looks good. It's not impossible to follow. Everything is still very clearly shot, and everything is very in focus, so you get a really good flow of the action. But it's a very harrowing and honestly kind of grim ending, because they treat it like the Riddler lost, but he still won. I mean, he killed everybody he was trying to kill. He exposed the conspiracy like he was trying to. He fucking flooded Gotham, and Gotham is basically destroyed at this point. He won, though. I mean, that's kind of surprising, is that the movie ends with Batman basically losing. He failed, and he won basically. It was kind of shocking, actually, but I really liked the way the ending is shot. You've got of course, the first little bit of like full light you get in the movie with the setting sun over the destruction of the city, and again, like I mentioned there, you have the reprisal of the Nirvana song, and that ties into Bruce's mentality, where he kind of realizes that he realizes what he really needs to be effective as Batman is he doesn't need to be the grim dark shadow of vengeance, but he needs to become more like a symbol of hope and peace for the city. And I like that. It's a great take on like a grim and gritty Batman that's not full on grim dark. Like, he's still got that bright spot of hope in there. And that's what I really liked about this Batman too, is that he's very down to earth, but not like they don't try to go for like a realistic vibe. You know, they're still a little goofy with the gadgets and stuff, but he's a very real feeling Batman, and I liked that too. So yeah, the movie ends with the city destroyed. Riddler's caught, but I mean he basically won anyways. Falcone is dead, and the city is basically in shambles, both in terms of the criminal underworld and just in general. Penguin's kind of usurped Falcone as the leader of the city, and they're kind of setting up like a no man's land kind of thing, where it's like, oh yeah, the city's in full martial law, it's all flooded, the National Guard's coming in, everything's fucked basically. Which is an interesting angle to go with. I kind of hope they do follow it up, because I know they've been trying to do No Man's Land in adaptations since the fucking story came out, and they just never get to actually pull it off. So it'd be interesting to see if they actually finally do No Man's Land. And of course, because I have to bring it up, because that's the one question never to be asking. Yes, the Joker is in the movie. Barry Keoghan was playing the Joker. He is not explicitly identified as the Joker. You don't fully see his face on screen. You do get to see his face, but he's obscured through glass because he's sharing the cell next to Riddler. And they're having a conversation where, of course, the Riddler's having a tantrum because even though he won, he still lost somehow. And you've got the Joker being like, "Oh, come on, man! You don't need to. You don't just put on a happy face. You know, you look like a clown there, but you know what? Hey, everybody loves a comeback story. Wink, wink." And of course, I think it was okay for the one scene he had as the Joker. I think he was okay. You didn't get to see they definitely had him in the makeup. They definitely did have like a. It was hard to see because of course it's obscured by like 3 layers of glass, but I think they're going for more of like a Heath Ledger vibe with more of like a scarred, physically deformed Joker rather than just being like a dude in makeup. And from what little I saw, it looked pretty good. But obviously, because he has one scene where he's not really doing anything, it's hard to judge his performance. He might be an interesting Joker for this kind of setting and this kind of story, but whether or not they do anything with him, we'll have to see. And of course, to finally get off of one final spoiler, no, there is not anything significant at the end of the credits. At the very end of the credits, you get a little ASCII text prompt popping up that says goodbye, which is a message from the Riddler. There was this thing earlier on where Batman was trying to communicating with the Riddler through like an ASCII chat, like an IRC kind of thing. And then it pops up with his font. And then, of course, it ends with like a little URL message, which is a URL they used earlier in the movie. And that's just a tie into a dumb ARG thing. It's not really worth it at this point, so it's not really worth staying over the credits, other than just, you know, showing your support to the people who made the movie. So, overall, this was a really good movie, actually. It definitely had its problems. A lot of the cast didn't feel either good fits or weren't really necessary to the plot. Like, they could have been any character and the movie would have been pretty much identical. But the mystery is pretty engaging. I like the settings they use. I like the sets. I like the color palette, the cinematography. Pattinson is, I would say, probably the second best live-action Batman, right behind Keaton. Of course, not counting Adam West, because Adam West wins every conversation involved with who's the best Batman. So I would highly recommend this. This is kind of what I've been looking for Batman for quite some time. I kind of hope DC not necessarily cashes in. You know, I don't want them to make a billion sequels. You know, there's a sequel hook, as I mentioned, and if they carry on from that, I'm going to be really interested. I'm definitely going to check it out, but I want more Batman like this. This is what I want more out of Batman. And it needed a little bit of fine-tuning. I think a lot of people mentioned this in reviews, but the PG-13 rating really harmed this movie. If they went for a full R, just with like the violence and the horror and everything else, this would have been much better. But as it is, it was pretty good. It was really good, actually. I really enjoyed it. So I would definitely check it out. I honestly kind of think this is one of the best of the live-action Batman movies. I mean, again, I would dare say it's better than the Nolan movies, to be entirely honest. I mean, granted, they're very different kind of movies, but in that general vibe of like the more realistic-ish Batman, this definitely wins over those ones. I would definitely prefer this one more than the Nolan-esque Batman movies or anything else. I would put it like right below Batman 89 in terms of quality, but I mean that's I'm not gonna put like a number on the score or anything like that, or I'm not gonna like make a full fucking ranking or anything like that. I think again, I think the first Burton movie was a little bit better, but they're definitely different movies, so it's hard to judge them one side by side. But yes, definitely recommend this. Definitely go and check it out. I hope this movie does well, and I hope we get more Batman like this. So this is far longer than I expected this to be. But yeah. This was just kind of me rambling kind of incoherently. This wasn't scripted or anything, as I'm sure you can tell. So this is really why I don't do these kinds of recent reviews. But yeah, if you enjoyed this, just share your thoughts. Obviously, I don't like begging for comments or likes or anything like that because I don't sound, I sound like a total douchebag. But yeah, I'm interested to hear what everybody else is thinking about this because I've been seeing a lot of similar opinions where it's almost perfect. There's some issues, but I think it's a really good movie. I really, really recommend it. So thank you for watching if you watched this, and I will see you next time with a more standard video, I guess is the best way to put it.